you.
Well, thank you.
So I guess we'll jump right in. So thanks everyone for being here today. I know it's going to be kind of a big group because about 400 of y'all registered. So thanks so much. So I don't know, but I guess we'll just kind of jump right into this. I'm a little bit nervous. It's kind of awkward, you know, being on the other side of a computer screen instead of being able to see everyone. So bear with me as I kind of get my bearings here. So kind of before we get started, I kind of want to just kind of go over a little content warning. So of course, like we're talking about mental health, things like anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and any other things that could be like triggering to folks in some ways. So if any time it of course becomes too intense or a little overwhelming, like please feel free to mute the call or like exit as needed, as it can be kind of activating. And so just take care of yourself. So in brief, the topics that we're kind of going over today are routine and the new normal, a work-life balance, creating a sense of social support in the time of isolation, and self-care. So with that said, indeed, these are really like heavy and timely topics, but I want to keep this kind of light and fun, add some levity that might be missing from our day-to-day lives right now. So why are we here? We're living in like a time of really great uncertainty right now, in a situation like we really never thought that we would have been in, you know, having a global pandemic unfold before us, and it can kind of make us feel helpless and powerless. In some ways, we're all kind of stuck in isolation, right? Whether this is being at home with a partner, pets, having to work from home, not having work due to losing hours or losing your job entirely, and the like. And for essential employees, obviously, like there's a different kind of stress, having to navigate their workplaces, you know, from shops and things to like doctors, nurses, and other frontline staff that are like doing their best to help us, you know, flatten the curve and get over the hump. Indeed, like isolation can feel very soul crushing and have a tremendous and emotional impact on our day-to-day lives, as our routines have been, you know, completely disrupted from what we're used to. So being alone with our thoughts can sometimes lead us to focusing more on what's bothering us, whether it's be anxiety or depressive thoughts. Excuse me. And it make us feel like more of a burden than before, as we, you know, find time to fixate and, you know, play those thoughts kind of over and over in our heads like a broken record. So we're here because we all share a common concern for our own mental health, and the health and well-being of, you know, those that are important to us, like friends, family, partners, spouses. So what I want to do is kind of provide some tools to help us, you know, navigate that and just have a lot of things at our disposal in case, you know, any of the tools just like somehow aren't working for us. So I'm looking at this topic from both like a personal perspective on what we can do to take care of ourselves and those close to us, but also from the lens of a provider. So much of what is going to be addressed today are things that have come up, you know, in virtual sessions that I've had, you know, with clients via, you know, telephone or some sort of video conferencing software, and kind of looking at how there's been like a really huge spike in anxiety and depressive symptoms and also like trauma responses to the stark changes in our day-to-day lives. So, the new normal. This is us. We're at our home, you know, trying to hunker down and do the best we can to navigate this kind of new world that we're living in right now. So, living a new normal from home, what do we do? So, a big important thing is creating a sense of routine. So, how do we kind of mirror our day-to-day lives? So our daily routines are pretty much out the window. This is obvious, you know, we're getting out of bed, we're not commuting every day, but we can sort of try and do pretty much everything that we've done before. We can get up, do our morning rituals, have our coffee, go to work, quote unquote, at the same time, come home, have social activities, and do our nighttime rituals as well. So things that we can do is kind of, you know, sleeping and waking at the same time that we would usually. It may seem like a given, but, you know, taking a shower and putting on fresh clothes every morning at the same time that we normally would. Wearing comfortable clothes is something that's important. And, you know, this doesn't mean kind of like wearing the same sweatpants every day, you know, because it's really easy to fall into that, or kind of athletic wear. Sort of want to dress in a way that makes us feel like we're ready to go out into the world or go into the office, ready to socialize. You know, I like to wear bright colors, kind of elevates my mood and just makes me feel a little bit like it's good about myself. It may seem obvious, but you know, when we're at home, like keeping hydrated and eating well, I like to, you know, keep a big water bottle by me, you know, in all of my sessions, fill up between them, you know, trying to eat balanced meals at around the same time that I normally would, you know, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and just, you know, making sure that we're taking care of ourselves. So balanced meals may be kind of a problem at this time, since it's kind of difficult maybe to find like our regular meats, proteins, produce, and other ingredients that we would normally cook with. So kind of making do with what we can find. A big thing, you know, with eating during this time is that, you know, seeing like an elevation in stress eating, and trying to engage in activities to avoid that. So something, you know, that we can do to kind of cope with this, you know, maybe you're feeling bored, you're feeling anxious, lonely, you just had a stressful Zoom meeting with your boss or any other sort of circumstance, is just kind of slowing down, taking pause and trying to ground yourself. So, you know, we can ask ourselves, am I hungry? It's a very simple question, and kind of like reflect on like what your body is feeling. So if I just had lunch, you know, an hour ago and say like, okay, I had a salad, I had a sandwich, I actually am full, might be enough to sort of help me take a step back and walk away from the snacks. Sort of the next level of that is asking ourselves, how am I feeling? So if we're having an emotional response as opposed to a physical one, it's sort of recommended that we try and engage in a different activity at the moment so that, you know, we can just cut the cord right there. So something easy to do would just be like drinking a glass of water. I think often, you know, folks mistake hunger or mistake thirst for hunger. So have a glass of water, see how you feel in a few minutes. But, you know, other things we could do would be like take a reading break. You know, this might not be listening to the news or reading some articles online, but just reading something that's fun for 10 to 15 minutes. Or if you're feeling lonely, maybe calling or texting a friend or a family member just to check in, say hi, and hopefully give yourself a distance to be able to step away from constantly snacking. Another big thing is keeping a schedule. A large theme that I'm sort of seeing right now is that folks have a hard time dealing with a lot of unstructured time. So building things into our day that make us feel productive can be important, but also acknowledging that we don't want to overdo it. So an example would be like if it's healthy or helpful for you to put exercise on your calendar, like that could hold you accountable to actually following through with going for that run or doing a yoga class at home or something. So if that feels good, go ahead and do it. Doing small tasks around the house can be also another form of productivity, but I would recommend doing things in chunks, meaning like 20 to 30 minutes at a time. So something that I do sometimes is setting a timer on my phone. So if I'm gonna do, you know, folding laundry or doing the dishes, I'll set a time for 20 minutes. And when the timer starts, I start working. When the timer goes off, I know it's done. I can kind of assess what I was able to accomplish and then be able to move on from that to see what else I have to do. So I'm not putting too much pressure on myself to have to get everything done in one fell swoop. Like not everyone is going to like Marie Kondo all their closets in a day because that would just be unmanageable and probably overwhelming. So another big thing is maintaining sleep hygiene. So a lot of people are really dysregulated in their like, normal sleep schedules right now. So deviation from that is kind of the enemy. Dysregulation from normal patterns causes a lot more depression and anxiety, even if you find yourself sleeping a lot more. With some of the clients I've been working with, they're finding themselves sleeping 10, 12 hours a day and then waking up feeling awful and not rested. And you know, we kind of process like, well, you haven't fed yourself today, you haven't showered, you haven't done all of these things. So probably you just have no energy, even though you slept for, you know, 12 hours. With this, like avoiding naps if you can. So if you need a nap for any reason or another, try and limit to about 20 minutes. Short power naps can increase alertness and increase productivity, but longer naps can, really throw off our sleep schedule, and you'll find yourself like laying awake, staring at the ceiling at night just because you have all this extra energy. And again, going to bed, waking up at the same time that you normally would, just creates like a nice building block and kind of bookends for your day. If you're having trouble falling asleep, I'd recommend just doing something. Get out of bed, read a book, do some light meditation for about 20 minutes, and then try and fall asleep again, just to see if that is helpful for you. As far as being in bed, I would recommend not doing work or other activities like playing games, watching TV, movies, using our phones or laptops. It's kind of a big no-no, because it's just it's more stimulating than relaxing. So it'll limit your ability to fall asleep very easily. Ultimately, just kind of considering that beds are for sleep and sex. So if we can limit our activities to that, we probably would be better off for it. As far as like substances and things are concerned, avoiding alcohol, caffeine, nicotine about 4 to 6 hours before you want to go to sleep. Trying not to drink so much water before you go to sleep, in case it disrupts your ability to have a full, uninterrupted night's sleep if you have to get up multiple times to use the restroom. We can exercise to release some extra energy. Getting outside or doing an at-home workout for maybe 30 minutes a day can just, reset ourselves, get us some fresh air. But that being said, trying to, limit that activity too late at night. So maybe 2 to 4 hours before you want to go to sleep would be like a cutoff time. Following a nighttime ritual is also important, like I kind of mentioned previously. So changing into comfortable clothes, washing your face, brushing your teeth, doing a meditation. So the point is that like a consistent plan, lets our bodies know that when we get into bed, it's time to go to sleep. And that's kind of nice. So if you need a little extra help, doing some journaling to kind of jot down some of your worries for the day, just to get them out of your head and onto paper so they're not, ruminating around in your head. Avoiding scary movies or like thrillers and things before we go to sleep, because they can be very activating. This is especially for folks that are prone to nightmares. And I've been seeing a lot more of that recently, where people are having really distressing dreams, not sleeping well, and then kind of thinking about them all the next day, and just kind of lather, rinse, repeat, and we're in this vicious cycle of not feeling rested. So if you end up not having a good night's sleep, so say you go to bed tonight, you wake up several times, you feel really gross in the morning, the idea is to try and stick with what you would normally do that you had planned for the day. And hopefully this will kind of reset our bodies and get us ready for a restful night's sleep. So, sleep is really important. It has a strong impact on our mental health. Staying in bed all day or not getting enough rest can, make us feel even more isolated than we already are, and exacerbate, our depressed and anxious moods. So just click on here. All right. So many of us here are probably working from home right now. So we can acknowledge that this is like a privilege that we're able to do this. We're able to stay safe in our own homes, that we're not having to, go out in the world, take the SEPTA every day, do all these things to go to our offices. So really what this means is by default, our homes have also become a virtual office. So finding a balance and sort of drawing lines between like what times and what spaces are conducive for work and specifically, designed for your workday are important. And thinking about how, when we finish the day, we're clocking out, how do we transition from being at work in our bedrooms to just being at home and being able to unwind for the day. So, I also want to acknowledge that if you're someone who has been unemployed or laid off, these strategies can still apply. Because looking for jobs, doing phone interviews that a lot of folks are doing right now, filing for unemployment and the like is also a lot of work. So in essence, like that can kind of be considered a job right now. And it's really coupled with the stress of like having a lot of financial worries right now. And that's very real for a lot of folks. So here's some tips on working from home. Again, like showering and getting dressed as you usually would for your workday to get into the mindset that it's time to go to work. and create a focus that it's time to be productive. Starting and ending work with concrete times to keep that space and maintain a boundary between work and home. So trying not to alter our schedules too much. You know, if you normally work 9 to 5, stick with it. Like, I'm not gonna go out and change from 10 to 6 or 11 to 7 just because I can, or, you know, I'm gonna work 4 hours in the morning and take a break and work some at night. This sort of blurs the lines between our work and home lives. So again, consistency and routine around work is very important. Creating a workspace that's comfortable and designated for work is really important so that you can distinguish between what is work and what is home. So the rest of our home really should be set aside for relaxation and decompressing and sort of just having some fun. So for as an example, like, I'm working from my bedroom desk, you know, kind of resisting the urge to go prop myself up behind y'all in comfortable pillows and blankets. But that would, you know, not be conducive to me getting anything done because I'd probably want to take a nap. So when we're working from home, we kind of have to navigate how we're connected with our coworkers, how we're connected with supervisors and other folks that we work with. So thinking about this, you know, how do we create healthy boundaries, right? So right now, you know, group chats, all these Zoom meetings, webinars have become like a new normal. So it's important to think about how comfortable we are with working in these systems. So as an example, with the other therapists that I work with at DVC, we've allotted time on Friday mornings to get together for like a brief Zoom check-in, maybe half an hour to 45 minutes. This gives us time to check in with ourselves about any logistics, you know, the system isn't working, I can't log into this and whatnot, but also to check in with our own emotions to see how we are feeling in doing the work that we do. And with that, sort of providing a really informal group supervision or clinical feedback on, you know, issues that are arising that we may have not have encountered before. In this, you know, in working with, you know, other coworkers, supervisors, asking for support when we need it is really important. So kind of questions that I've been asking myself is, you know, how have things changed since I've been home? You know, what does it look like to utilize support staff that we made to come to rely on that, you know, are doing things behind the scenes for us? How are we communicating with them? How has, you know, supervision and things changed, you know, just over the course of a few weeks where it just looks completely different? So these are just kind of things to take into account as we try and do the best that we can from home. Acknowledging that working from a computer all day is exhausting. You know, we're all sort of staring at the black mirror right now, you know, listening to this talk, and it's, you know, really, really exhausting. So taking breaks is really important, and maybe just doing some exercises, even if you're sitting down. So, you know, just kind of taking time to roll our heads back and forth, stretch our shoulders, like work our fingers, stretch our arms, all of these things, kind of all the way down to your toes, like squeezing your feet just to relax and, you know, work on the muscles a little bit, standing up and sitting down just to get out of the chair for a little while. A big thing that's been coming up to me is a lot of fatigue with my eyes. So I have been trying to, like, even between sessions or like every couple of hours, you know, take off my glasses and with clean hands, of course, you know, closing my eyes, putting some light pressure and massaging just to give my eyes a break from staring at the screen all day. This is really, really not normal for me to be staring at a screen and having so much screen time all day. So the fatigue has been real and not really fun. I do have a list of exercises that I can provide in the resources that kind of do like a head to toe workout. These workouts are really in short intervals, about like 30 seconds a piece. So it probably would take like less than 10 minutes to get through them. Kind of the last thing is that technology is both a blessing and a curse. You've kind of seen the frustration around trying to log into virtual desktops, trying to navigate technical difficulties around the video is not working, the audio is not working, the internet cut out, all of these things. So if this happens, like, you know, it's making our jobs a lot harder than they already are. It's making things take exponentially longer than they would have if we were sitting in our office. So, you know, if problems arise, like taking a step back, not trying to force the connection. I think my remote desktop kills about 5 times a day. So, just giving myself 5 minutes and not trying to frantically click and just hope that it works. So you probably will be angry and annoyed, but it's something that we're all dealing with, and I think that's pretty much understood. So we're trying to be very chill around how we, communicate about these things. All right, so our social lives have obviously been very disrupted. We can't really do a lot of, what we just kind of taken for granted, going out to eat, going to bars, like things like that with friends. Obviously, Mario and company are not practicing social distancing right now, so that I hope that you all are on your end. So here's kind of some like brief tips and tricks of how we can create some semblance of a regular social life. So it's fun to kind of schedule some time during the week, maybe a couple times, just to see and hear from friends and family. Virtual happy hours, kind of watching movies together, virtual concerts, board games have really become kind of like the go-to, I think, for a lot of people. And folks are getting really, creative with this. I actually watched a video of people playing Animal Crossing, playing musical chairs as a way to kind of pass the time and just kind of connect in a kind of out of the box way. And with this, comes with, dressing for the social life that we want. So taking off the Lululemon leggings and putting on something that makes you feel like you're about to go out. If you have, an outfit that you'd plan to wear to a concert that got canceled, or a dinner or cocktail party that you're no longer able to attend, like put on something that makes you feel good, and maybe put on something that makes you feel silly. I had a FaceTime date with a friend and we wore unicorn onesies just because, and it was so much fun. I don't think I'll ever go back. So, just do what makes you feel good in these instances. It's important to acknowledge that right now, like we can't, go visit our moms, go visit our friends, give them a hug. Kind of we're lacking that like human connection and touch. Though I find that just being able to see people and sort of hear their voices has been comforting in a way, since I then know that they too are staying safe, at home. Excuse me. And of course, with socialization, just as it was when we were out in the outside world, we need to be mindful of our capacity to socialize and do things. I've been hearing from a lot of folks and clients alike that, they've just been feeling exhausted in, being on the phone all day, being on a video chat all day, when they're just feeling like an obligation to check in with everyone every single day. And they find it just so exhausting. And then also find that it's taking time away from caring for themselves. And with that, there's a sense of guilt of, why am I taking care of myself if someone else is struggling? So I think it is important to take care of ourselves first, because if we actually do take care of ourselves and have the space to take care of others, that's obviously optimal for everyone involved. Another thing that's kind of been coming up is how do we exit from these situations? Being on a Zoom call or like a Zoom happy hour with friends, time goes by very quickly, and all of a sudden 3 hours later, you're like, oh, I'm still here. I don't really see this ending anytime soon, and I'm tired. So maybe before, when we were out like at a party or something, it would be easy to sort of tell a little white lie of, I need to go walk the dog. He's been home for a long time by himself, so I gotta go. I'll see you later. Or, any little excuse that you could have to sort of, just give yourself grace to leave. So maybe now that kind of looks like, I need to make dinner, so I'm gonna hop off the call, but I'll talk to you later. That could work. But also the most direct way is, just knowing that it's still okay to say like, hey, I'm done, I gotta go. You don't need an excuse to like say goodbye for now. It doesn't mean that you're abandoning folks. You're just taking the space that you need and have reached your social capacity for the moment. All right, so self-care and kind of taking care of ourselves, and what does this look like it can be different for everyone. So, you know, I've been taking extra long walks with my dog, trying to play some more video games, like things like that that just make me feel good and grounded. I do want to kind of preface this conversation on, you know, self-care and wellness to acknowledge that there's kind of been like a myth of productivity going around that, you know, we need to be doing things all the time to be well and take care of ourselves while we're at home and while we're in isolation. So I have been seeing like a lot of folks that are, a lot of posts that are sort of like in effect, you know, shaming people if they're not doing something to improve themselves. Meaning like, I'm gonna learn a new language while I'm in isolation, or learn new skills, professional development, and saying that, you know, if we don't use these time to learn these things, we can't use the excuse that we don't have time for them. We're just not disciplined. And I think this is patently false, like full stop. You know, the core of this kind of seeks to say that since we have more time, we should be spending it on self-reflection and self-discovery, which for some folks can be conducive to learning something new or, you know, developing a new skill, but for some folks it's not, and that's perfectly fine. You know, sometimes the best way that we take care of ourselves is to do nothing, and know that that is fine. So the point is that, you know, only we can know how to take care of ourselves. So strategies and suggestions that I'm going to talk about like just might not work for everyone, and we need to find ways that feel safe and comfortable to cope in our own ways. So something big I think that has come up is sort of, you know, navigating our consumption of social media and other news outlets. You know, think about how it looks to like scroll through Facebook right now, to scroll through Instagram, even like TikToks, or, you know, navigating the news sites that we usually read on an everyday basis, and, you know, the emotional impact that it has on us every day. Overconsumption of news and social media can lead to more anxiety over the unknown, or perhaps spark, excuse me, fear, with like fear over reporting that can often be sensationalized. You know, it can feel productive to read the news, because we all want to be, you know, in some way informed as to what's going on in the world. However, I think it's important also to be mindful of, you know, the fact that this could contribute to like ruminating thoughts that can take us to some pretty dark places. You know, we need to be mindful of where we get our news, and, you know, fact checking if we have the capability to do that. And, you know, also acknowledge that the information that we have is changing on a day-to-day basis, which can be very confusing and overwhelming. So just kind of like navigating in a day-to-day basis. You know, I allow myself to read the news in the morning and the evening, just to give myself the space in the regular course of my day, so that I'm not just going down the click hole, reading an article, clicking on related article, clicking on related article, and just kind of spinning these wheels that can be very activating. So as far as like self-care activities, like for general mental health, again, doing nothing as a form of self-care. We can do things like mindfulness exercises. Finding a good app that you like to use can be fun, as if you like to do meditations. There's so many out there in like various app stores. Some are free, some are not. I think it's kind of fun to play around with them and see, you know, what guided meditations feel good. Does this voice feel soothing? Does it not? Do I need to focus more on like a relaxation meditation, like a sleep meditation, these types of things. For other providers that are with us right now, if you have an MPI number, their app Headspace is offering a free premium membership for folks for like through the end of the year. So you just need an email address and your MPI number, and you can access like a complete library of premium meditations, which has been really cool, because they have things for sleep, living in like working in silence, like these types of things that can be very helpful for us. As I said, like many of these resources are free. If you go on YouTube, there's so many that you can access. So that is a nice like free tool that people can use. For a lot of folks, like utilizing breathing techniques can ground you and alleviate some anxiety and things. I like simple techniques that don't require a lot of thought or like any tools. like a square breath, for instance. So if we take in a breath for 4 seconds, like a nice deep breath, hold it for 4 seconds, release for 4 seconds, and then holding an empty breath for 4 seconds is kind of nice. You can do it several times. The idea is to sort of only focus on breathing and counting. So I think all of us are capable of counting to 4, and we're pretty good at breathing by now at this point in our lives. So it's just like a really simple technique that we can use. And if like more negative thoughts start intruding in our head, maybe start over and just do it for like a minute, maybe 5 minutes, just to see whatever works for you. Things like adult coloring books are kind of fun. Just kind of doing mandalas or like fun animal pictures. It can be a little silly. Something that's kind of fun is to blow bubbles if you have access to them, since it provides kind of like a multifaceted intervention, if you will, where we're taking a deep breath, blowing the bubbles, then trying to be mindful of what they look like, what the shapes are, is there a smell associated, can we touch them and have like a sort of tactile experience with feeling them pop on your fingertips and things like that. A fun one is to utilize a journal. So writing is a nice creative outlet to get thoughts out of our heads and onto paper so that we don't need to fixate on them and replay them over in our heads. While there's certainly space to write about a lot of like the negative things that are going on right now and our worries, there's also space to kind of focus on positive things that are going on, things that we're like grateful for. So like a gratitude journal, for instance, you know, writing 3 things in a day that we're grateful for, you know, focusing on resources as opposed to deficits in our daily lives. And can also, if you keep enough of them, you can sort of reflect back on them to see how things have changed, to see and kind of like remind ourselves that we do have positive aspects in our lives. I use a bullet journal, which I find fun because it's really creative in nature. You know, this is just a blank notebook with little dots on it. So I have to create everything that goes into it. So like a calendar of things I need to do, you know, future goals, making lists of books you want to read, movies you want to watch, albums you want to listen to. Something that is really fun for me is doing like a habit tracker, just to see, you know, what's going on in my day, like what emotions are coming up for me, how many hours did I sleep, did I have a lot of caffeine, did I eat all my meals that day, and other like activities, did I exercise, did I go for a run, these types of things that we can kind of track. And you know, when we have all this data over the course of, let's say, a month, we can kind of see if there are patterns in our moods, patterns in our behaviors that we can kind of address, like what were the high points, what were the low points, and how am I dealing with that? If writing is something that you are interested in, but sometimes getting started can be difficult, maybe searching for some writing prompts. Some things, you know, you can find a writing prompt that you can do in 15, 20 minutes. And here are a couple of examples, writing about someone or something that's extremely important to you. Maybe writing about 10 things that you wish people knew about you, or something you did this year that you're proud of. And perhaps timely, kind of writing about a current problem that you're having and see if you can identify any possible solutions to that. Exercise is also important. Trying to engage in something movement related in about 30 minutes a day, taking into account like our physical limitations and abilities. Now, right now, all over the internet is a lot of at-home workouts with trainers and other health professionals that are floating around that are free to try. So it could be a good time to try something new. Like if you've never done yoga because you're too anxious about actually going to a studio, you know, trying it out from home to see if it feels good, and then maybe taking the plunge once we're able to go out into the world. Taking a walk outside, a bike ride, longer walks with your dog can be refreshing, kind of give you some time away from the computer, away from your house, get some fresh air, get some sun if we have it. It's pretty gloomy today. And just kind of giving yourself some space to recharge a little bit. I like to play video games. It's a nice escape to go to another world where, you know, things aren't so insane. I've logged an unspeakable number of hours into Animal Crossing right now, and I will not apologize for it. So like getting immersed into a story in a different world can be very comforting and sort of accomplishing if you can, you know, finish the game and have the happy ending that you were looking for. And kind of holding the control is also a nice like tactile and grounding experience. So that can be useful as well. Using our senses is something that I find kind of interesting and fun. You know, cooking. There's a lot of, you know, cutting involved, different smells, different ingredients, tastes. It can be sort of a meditative experience. Using a new recipe that you haven't used before because you actually have to focus on it can just be, you know, forcing you to be in the moment and not kind of drifting when we've made the same, you know, pasta 100 times. Using a favorite scent or a lotion can be soothing. You know, lavender, of course, always comes up when we talk about these things. Maybe just putting some on your hands, closing your eyes, taking a deep breath in, and just kind of being present with the smell, its calming properties, and see, you know, what that does for you. Looking at art, watching feel-good movies, listening to some comforting music is also a lot of fun. You know, there's been a lot of like online concerts and things that have been put on, you know, Broadway shows, symphonies that are, you know, uploading pre-recorded things that we can just kind of escape to for a little while. Or just like creating something with our hands. If you have access to art supplies, doing a painting, crafting, doing some knitting, crocheting, because it's one, a very hands-on activity, and two, there's something that is produced out of it that can be very, very comforting for us. How are we doing? Okay. So I kind of want to address kind of the darker side of kind of what's going on. You know, we've talked about, you know, a lot of things to take care of ourselves and, you know, incorporate some positivity into our daily lives. But, you know, the reality right now is like a lot of people are being sick, a lot of people are dying, and, you know, how do we deal with this news, especially if it impacts us personally? So let's get some water. So how do we sort of cope with illness or the anxiety of getting sick? I think it's important to acknowledge the possibility that we could have like COVID-19. A lot of experts are kind of recommending that we work under the assumption that we already have it, or we already did, and everybody else already does as well. Taking, you know, precautions to minimize risk, to make us feel comfortable going out to the grocery store, going to Target, or the like, you know, practicing social distancing, limiting going out as much as possible, wearing masks, washing our hands properly, avoiding touching our faces. If you do start to feel ill, like, know that there's supports in place, being in contact as much as possible with our doctors and other medical providers as we need, just to, you know, report symptoms, see what they would recommend, just so you're not just sort of alone with those thoughts and feelings and think that there's nothing you can do about it. If you are tested for the virus, like knowing that it can take about a week to get results. I've worked with some clients that have been tested, and, you know, the entire session was just, you know, how do I deal with the time between now and when that result comes back? And what if it does come back positive? Like, what do I do? How do I navigate that? What is this going to do to my body? I already have complicated health issues. So just really holding space for that, trying to be comforting and as informed about, you know, age demographics, like what does this mean as far as, you know, if you have a compromised immune system and the like. You know, the step further, of course, is worrying about, you know, death and the fear of yourself or others dying. And I think this is trickier. So like watching the news and like seeing the numbers kind of grow exponentially with confirmed cases and deaths is indeed overwhelming. You know, the impact of the virus is widespread enough that by proxy, we pretty much all kind of know someone who's been affected by the virus. And that is a really scary thing to say. So, you know, with working with folks that have been impacted very personally, or kind of watching someone pass away, like this has been, you know, it's been really, you know, just kind of being there to take on that emotion and try and just support them in whatever they need, because that looks different for everyone. And just kind of being there to remind ourselves, like, I do need to take care of myself. This is way out of my control, and that is a really powerless and helpless thing to think. You know, other things that I'm seeing, you know, particularly with younger folks that I work with, is an increase in self-harm and suicidal ideation. So the isolation is leading to this steep exacerbation of symptoms and hopelessness that can be like really, really too difficult for people to cope with. And this manifests in very, very different ways depending on the individual. So working with folks that, you know, have a history of like self-harm and ideation, I've seen like a return of these intrusive thoughts of like, I should just die because I'm going to get killed by this thing to begin with. And, you know, thinking about and even like engaging in self-harm again, which has been a lot to deal with. So I've been trying to connect with community resources, doing safety planning for these things that has been crucial. You know, offering, you know, telephone numbers, places they can call if they really do need to go to the emergency room, you know, offering the closest CRC to their home, these types of things, just to have a system in place and like a step-by-step of, if this happens, what do I do? There is an app that I have used in the past with folks. It's free. It is called Calm Harm. And what it does is it kind of provides 5 to 15 minute activities to do things like breathing exercises, distractive exercises, creative things like writing, just to kind of help get people out of the mindset and kind of block out some of the intrusive thoughts to recenter themselves. Another big theme is an increase in irritability and anger right now. Things that I've heard are sort of, you know, I'm so angry and I can't control it. I don't know why I'm so angry. I have a shorter fuse recently. When I'm like this, I feel guilty for being angry. And I think this is perfectly like normal and logical. You know, anger is an emotion that we all experience from time to time. But I kind of like to walk this back a little bit and think about anger as a secondary emotion. So, you know, asking people to reflect like what's behind the anger. So as an example, you know, reading a bunch of news articles, I feel really angry about how things are being handled. And maybe behind the anger is a sense of, I'm feeling disappointed by how this is unfolding, or I'm feeling hopeless because I feel not enough is being done to help us. So just thinking about that, like anger is very much a response to other things that we're feeling, but maybe just don't see right off the bat. In sort of like, it's very upsetting that I've been seeing a lot of articles about an increase in like interpersonal and domestic violence. And if we work with folks, you know, that have a history of these issues, finding ways to help them find resources in a time of crisis, you know, coming up with a code word or a subject like, I want to talk about XYZ, that would, you know, alert us to a present danger and that they need help. This, you know, comes with, you know, acknowledging that when I'm working with someone over the phone, I can't see, you know, who else is in the room, like, are they being watched by their like abuser, and just having like a lack of privacy in general has been difficult to work in these systems. So just something to acknowledge and kind of think about. So another thing that I've kind of been thinking about, you know, in reading Facebook posts, reading, you know, connecting with people, is this sort of I can't mentality. So I want to think about, you know, how we can mourn that we're not able to move about in our regularly scheduled activities that bring us joy, that make us feel whole, you know, beautiful, but that doesn't mean we're never going to be able to do them again. So these are kind of like some really, really super common things that may seem trivial, but are very important to folks. I can't get my hair cut, I can't get my nails done, etc. So, you know, how do we reframe this into a positive aspect? Like, if I can get my hair cut now, but I can give my hair a break from blow drying every day. I can take a break from putting a bunch of stuff in my hair to make it look cute. This is the first time I've done my hair in a month. So it's been a mess, but here we are. A bunch of my hairstylist friends are, screaming, do not shave your head, do not shave your head. Britney Spears did that for us in 2007, so we don't have to experience that on our own. So, taking some time to think about, if I can't get my hair cut, I can let it grow out and I can maybe do something more fun when I'm able to go back to my stylist again, and they'll probably thank you for not doing anything drastic. I can't get my nails done. I painted mine last night just as like a fun activity for myself. It's a nice way to just make myself feel a little bit more pretty. Not being able to go to movies or theaters. I think I mentioned before, a lot of bands are uploading concerts. If you want to have that experience, maybe you weren't able to go when they were touring, it's kind of fun. Being able to rent a new release that you maybe missed when you were at the theater, watching a Broadway show online, doing things like that. If we can't visit museums and things, a lot of them are offering free virtual tours right now, which has been kind of cool. I think even the Louvre has a 3D virtual tour that you can go on, which is awesome. Not being able to, eat at your favorite restaurant, you can do is kind of have some fun by ordering takeout, and you're also like supporting a local business in the process. You can take an online cooking class to maybe learn a new skill, learn a new recipe, and just have some fun with that while nourishing yourself. Not being able to go to the gym, you can do a virtual workout. I can go outside, I can go for a run. These are things that are safe as long as we take precautions. Certainly this is not, an exhaustive list of things of I can'ts to I cans, but the idea is to be able to reframe a negative cognition into a positive one, to be able to acknowledge that, these changes, while they're very disruptive, are temporary. So we, in some way, will be able to return to, where we once were. So what does it all mean? What do we do with all this information? So what are our kind of takeaways from all this information that, we've been talking about for the last, 50 minutes? So kind of takeaways for me are that, again, routine is your friend. Creating that structure, being able to navigate our days without feeling overwhelmed with, all this extra time that we don't know what to do with ourselves. It's okay to take space for yourself and take care of our own needs first before we try to address the needs of others. We have more to do than we think. And while being productive is great, it's also fine to give yourself space to do nothing. Take all the time you need. If you want to check out for a couple days, go ahead. It's the weekend right now. It's the perfect time to do that. And kind of acknowledging ultimately that all of this is very temporary. For many of us, we'll be able to go back to work hopefully in a month, and try and rebuild what once was. And kind of with that knowledge in mind, kind of thinking to the future and what our transition back to normalcy looks like. So kind of coming to the end of my content. That was a little bit faster than I expected, but we'll take some questions and comments, and since I'll probably never get to have the opportunity to say it, thank you for coming to my TED Talk, and we'll go from there. So thank you.
Awesome. That was wonderful, Justin. Before we jump into the questions, I actually have a favor to ask of you.
Sure.
Could you guide us through what you described as square breathing?
Sure. So I was taught this by a grad school professor, in one of my semesters, where he told us sometimes the simplest tools are the better. So if we want to do an exercise right now, so I'm going to find a comfortable place to sit, close my eyes, just kind of relax my body. And what we're going to do is take a deep breath in, through our mouth or our nose, whatever feels comfortable, and count to 4. 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to hold the breath for 4 seconds. 4, and exhale big for 4 seconds. And hold empty for 4. So you can try it one more time. So breathe in. Hold. Exhale. Empty. So it's the easiest thing that we can do. It's nice just to ground ourselves. I do it between sessions a lot just to kind of reset the clock because I only have maybe 10, 15 minutes between them. So that's kind of fun, doesn't require any tools, and minimal kind of concentration, I guess.
That was great. I mean, I already feel much better and able to actually go into these questions. So thank you. And I hope everyone who has joined us has participated in that and feels a little lighter. So we have a few questions here. Our first one is part statement and part question. I love the fact that you use my favorite word, pause. I created a new normal for myself by walking each morning before remotely working from home. And what would you say to someone if they are having anxieties around going out because of COVID-19? Kind of like, you know, people love going out and people want to create that new normal, but what would you say to someone who may have health anxiety or just general anxiety about exiting their front door?
Sure. I think kind of how I can frame this is that, you know, I would kind of use a similar technique of someone who has a lot of social anxiety, where, you know, how are we preparing ourselves to go out into the world? Kind of acknowledging people we might encounter, things we might see that could be distressing. And with that, like kind of guiding people with how do we take precautions as far as our health, like kind of, you know, wearing masks and things, of course, like it may not feel comfortable, but is also providing like a little bit more safety. So like I said, just sort of how do we, like teaching people how to prepare to ask themselves questions for what they're going to encounter. You know, I've worked with a lot of folks in the past that, you know, have experienced like violence and things where like it's hard for them to go outside just for fear of something bad happening to them in general. So just saying that, like using that technique, kind of allowing people to like be more self-aware, and trying to navigate that as best they can.
Great. Yeah, I like that advice. Yeah, kind of just like taking stock of your surroundings, sort of. Yeah, that's kind of what I've done personally. You know, I am one of those folks who was scared to go outside, but like, you know, putting on a mask is definitely uncomfortable, you know, but it's something that will aid in my anxiety. So thank you. Do you have any recommendations for trying to juggle the stress from heightened work requirements during work from home when your anxiety is making it difficult to focus on getting those things done?
This is hard. You know, doing this work that we do, I think, is difficult to begin with. You know, thinking about our own kind of anxieties and stresses that we have to navigate as people that have to move about the world, and also like shouldering all of the kind of anxieties that everyone else is also experiencing. Like I see like, over 20 people a week and it's like, okay, like I'm going to go into this and I'm going to kind of have a response myself. So, you know, what I've been doing is just like trying to reach out for support, you know, with colleagues and things if we need it. You know, like I mentioned early on, you know, I do that check-in call with the other therapists from work just to, you know, acknowledge that like maybe we're not doing well one week and like that's okay. Like how can we feel supported in that? Giving myself some space, you know, to take a break during the day. Like I'm intentional about scheduling my appointments for certain times so that I can build breaks into my day, and like not feel bad about that. Like I'm going to take a whole lunch. I'm going to plan a 30-minute walk in the afternoon before I do my last session just so that I can check in with myself. So I think that's kind of been helpful, but it has been difficult. I mean, I've been trying to do like notes and things in a timely manner, but sometimes I'm just so exhausted, and like I think that's okay. Like if I need to wait till the next day to write something, like it's still going to be pretty fresh. I can still do it. And, you know, just being as communicative as possible with people. Like if we're getting emails, like, why aren't you scheduling enough sessions? Like these types of things, you know, it's overwhelming, and we can acknowledge that. So just like being kind to yourself and acknowledging like your limits and how the work is having an impact on you.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. And I like your kind of reframing of it, looking at it through the lens of productivity and going back to what you mentioned about productivity culture in general. I
Right.
think oftentimes, we live in a society where it's like you got to work hard, you got to produce, you got to,
Right.
just turn out work. I
Yeah.
really hope that after all of this is said and done, maybe this is a little optimistic, that we as like a society can look at work as something that isn't, a conveyor belt style. We're not robots. And, I know myself, I will definitely be incorporating more self-care activities into my work when I go back to the office, more times to like go for a walk, eat my lunch, take a breath in between tasks and not just work straight through.
Exactly.
So our next question is in regards to news consumption. Does it make sense to give yourself a break from the news because it can become overwhelming and depressing?
I think the short answer to that is yes. Um, like from a personal standpoint, like I said, I put limits on how much I consume just because it's really easy just to get too engrossed and then you're completely distracted and things just make you feel really gross and icky. I know, like, for instance, after the election, I did the same thing. I was only, limiting to like once or twice a day, or maybe some days, like I just didn't have the capacity to do it at all. And that's fine. Like, it doesn't mean that I'm not trying to stay informed. Like, I can get some of this knowledge from like my husband or like things like that, that can take some of that stress over having to seek out that information and kind of comprehend it all. So take a break if you need it. Like, it's still going to be there when you come back, unfortunately. So we can acknowledge that. Like, if you need a day or two off, take it.
Awesome, thank you. We have one person who said they felt guilty about taking a nap. What do you say to that?
If you need it, take it.
Mhm.
Like I said, like a power nap is perfectly fine. You could take a longer nap if you want. But like I said, it can be disruptive if you're trying to get to bed at night and just kind of can't fall asleep. So, if you need it, don't feel guilty. We all need to check out. Um, I've taken a nap with my dog in the afternoon sometimes just because I just need a moment to myself to reflect before I can like do paperwork and like these things that need to get done. So don't feel guilty. You're good.
And to that, I definitely think pets are having the best month ever. This I'm sure there are a lot of cats and dogs and other pets who are incredibly happy that they get their owners and get more time with their
I
owners.
think our dog is over us though, because we've just been like doting on him too much.
Yeah, our cat is definitely confused, but just moving along, we have a question here. What do we say to clients or students who are anxious about the safety practices of other people in their household, knowing they can't control the actions of other people?
That's really, really difficult. And this has come up with a lot of like the younger folks that I work with that kind of like are living in kind of communal settings. Um, Basically, what I've been trying to do is kind of do almost like some role play activities where we kind of can practice dialogues for like self-advocacy and explaining like why these things are important, and hopefully like get to an understanding where there's some sort of compromise. I know it's been a problem like with people having friends over and like these things where it's just really not safe. So just getting them to the point where they feel empowered to actually stand up for their needs and stand up for their own health, I think has been helpful. And unfortunately, like sometimes it doesn't work, unfortunately. But, just reminding them of what they personally can do to take care of themselves, washing our hands, doing all these things that, make us feel personally safe when we can't control the behaviors of others. It's really tricky, tricky navigation.
Yeah, it's hard, and we don't want to police other people, but I think safety is paramount. How does one avoid being emotional when speaking with participants about the COVID-19 pandemic?
Sorry, could you repeat that one more time? I like lost.
Oh, how do you avoid being emotional when speaking with participants about COVID?
Hmm. Um, I think in some ways it's okay. You know, I think that a lot of the people that I've worked with and we're talking about our anxieties around these things, it can be sort of refreshing and comforting for them to hear, like, you know what, I feel that too. And we're all kind of in the same boat. We're all navigating these same things, but, you know, we're taking steps to deal with that. And like, that's why we're here. So like, I'm not gonna like burst into tears or something like in a session, but like, you know, it can, you know, be activating for you. Like when people are talking about the same experience that you're feeling, like even going to the grocery store. So I think, you know, being honest and sort of transparent that like, these are feelings that we're all having, and kind of gets that sense of like, we're equal in this. Cause often like with the work that we do, there's obviously like a power dynamic and like a differential there, where like they're looking to you as an expert. And, you know, while in some cases, like, you know, it's true in some instances, but, you know, this is a very like unique shared experience. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like if we all just take a step back, and it's hard to see outside of ourselves because a lot of us are in fact in our homes in a limited space and just looking at the same thing every day. And communication is, I'm sure for a lot of people, difficult. It's hard to kind of see what others are going through. So I imagine, have your therapist say, listen, I'm going through this as well. That's it, like you said, it's reassuring. You know, my therapist, for instance, said, I need a week off. You know, and I was like, I get it.
Get it?
You know, please take a week off. I totally respect that. And, you know, I'm not mad, you know, and I think we keep coming back to the word kindness. I think kindness is really important, not just for yourself, but for others, for your coworkers, and like everyone working around you. Kindness is, you know, paramount during this time. So thank you for that. Someone said, Justin, I love your color combination. So you're getting comments on your outfit. So one question, what do you do if you are allergic to the mask? Now, I think sorry, I don't want to answer for you, but.
To be honest, like I'd be curious what like the allergy is. Like, is it like a fabric thing? Because like there's different things that you can do, like as far as like what I've been reading, like making things out of a t-shirt or things that might not be, you know, activating of that allergy. Like I can't really speak like from a medical perspective on, you know, these things, but I know I've made like DIY masks out of like handkerchiefs and things just because we couldn't find them. Just kind of being creative and finding something that works for your body.
Absolutely. I think that's a good one. And I think there's a lot of question around discomfort and masks, and that can be very, I like your word activating, that can be very agitating at times and really cause distress when you're out and about. I know, for instance, my mother, who was immunocompromised, was going outside in a mask, and she had to go outside. So she also had to wear the mask just for safety reasons. She had a fit. God bless her. You know, she's like, I can't do this. So her and my father created more comfortable masks. So it's really about your own personal like comfort level, I think, when it comes to masks, you know, and also really staying on top of the recommendations. That's also helpful. Just making sure you find like the real data. Don't get your news or your info. This is kind of my own personal plug. Don't find info from memes or you know, questionable Facebook sources. Always go to a reputable.gov.org.edu website. So moving along, we have a couple more questions. This one is about grief. How does one handle when you lose a family member and you're not able to be there to say goodbye?
This is also really tricky because I know we had a friend that, you know, had a relative pass away, and they had almost like a funeral over virtual chat and over like a video to like just be there with folks, you know, to share memories and to do these things in a really outside the box way. You know, I work with a client whose mother passed, and he wasn't able to be at the funeral and be at the burial and things, and found that really really distressing to like not have that closure of being able to say goodbye. So we sort of had our own kind of, I don't know, like reflection on like what were things that you loved about this person. Like, let's talk about that when they were in your life. Do you have any strong memories of them? Do you have any objects that they gave you, presents that you've held on to, photos that we can sort of talk about and just kind of find comfort and, you know, solace in the fact that they're like maybe at peace right now. And, you know, how do we move on from this and how do we find our own closure? But that's very difficult and like very unique to the individual, depending on like what the relationship with, you know, the person who's passed was. So that's really hard. And
it's difficult. And you mentioned earlier that most of us probably know someone closely or by proxy who has passed, you know, and I definitely think solace in that like, this is going to be a shared grieving process. You know,
yeah.
we don't have to grieve alone. You know, you see Elizabeth Warren just lost a family member, you know,
Yes.
so you can imagine what kind of grief she's going through, and she's working too, you know, so.
Right.
Which actually leads us into our next question, kind of about privilege and power dynamics when it comes to working. You know, some of us are at home, some of us are out on the front lines working. Someone asks, how can we support family members and partners that are essential workers while being considered non-essential employees, and anxiety surrounding the pandemic? So kind of like, how does a non-essential worker find the space to support a family member who's an essential worker?
Again, like I mentioned, like, of course, making sure your own needs are met first, and then kind of like checking in and kind of asking directly, like, what do you need from me right now? Is there something I can provide for you? Like, I have a lot of friends that are physicians, and so, you know, we've been doing phone calls and just kind of checking in, like, how has your week been going? Do you have everything that you need? Do you feel safe? Like, know that I'm here for you, that if you need anything, like, please call. And, you know, it's very scary, like kind of having to like acknowledge, like, they're putting their lives on the line to help us out. And, you know, I think also like kind of acknowledging like that we appreciate the work that they do, kind of gives them like a sense of, not, it's gonna sound terrible, but like a sense of purpose. Like, there is a reason that I'm doing this, like, so that I care about like society and I care about people's health. And, you know, I don't think that they get thanked enough. It's like often the work of providers is thankless, and the only feedback we get is like, you didn't help me enough. So, you know, just saying like, you know, I appreciate that you were at the hospital for 12 hours yesterday, and like, I can't imagine what that must feel like. And just checking in with what they need, because we can't know unless we ask.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that, like thanking them, you know, providing that thank you is really beneficial to folks who feel probably like they're taxed with work, you know. And also I personally like to pair something like gratitude with advocacy, you know, thinking about advocacy we can do for essential workers during this time.
Right.
You know, kind of fighting for better pay, better, you know, protective equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we actually have a comment saying that a lot of local artists are making 100% cotton face masks. So supporting local artists is always another big thing to do during this time. So I will actually see if I can't find some artists that are making some masks in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I've seen some posts as well, like, you know, $10, support them when they're like out of work. Like, a lot of performers are out of work right now, like doing these like virtual shows and trying to create stuff to sell. So the gig economy is still alive. So if we can support some local folks, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. One question is, how does one avoid overthinking about COVID-19?
I think this sort of like harkens back to like how we consume information about it, creating boundaries and distance of how much we're exposing ourselves to it, whether that is limiting going outside, whether that's limiting reading about it. We also need to find creative ways to distance ourselves as much as we can from COVID-19. So, you know, doing activities to kind of take yourself out of that mindset. Any of the exercises and self-care techniques that we spoke about earlier can be helpful. But, you know, just kind of trying to be introspective and knowing our limits with how much we're able to take in as far as like information, I think is like the most helpful thing.
Next question is from a frontline worker. What advice do you have for caseworkers, social workers, etc., that have to still go into the community and work with clients face-to-face or in hot zones around those who are COVID-19 positive, specifically regarding the anxiety and health safety concerns of the staff member?
Oh boy. That I really don't know. Like it's hard to sort of think about that like people are being put in these like unnecessary situations. Maybe like trying to advocate for themselves as far as like with supervisors, like why are we doing this? Like, is this against like health recommendations? Is this like what is the rationale behind this? Like, I myself am kind of like forceful when it comes to like self-advocacy, but like I understand that maybe that's not easy for some folks. But, you know, trying to be there to support them, trying to be there to see if there's anything we can do to like add to their ability to stay safe. But that is, I just can't imagine like having to be like put face to face, like in a situation unnecessarily. So that's difficult for me to answer, unfortunately.
You know, and I think when it comes to essential workers, it's hard. You know, I think we're seeing across the country different definitions of what an essential worker is, and, you know, different legislative definitions of what an essential worker is. And I'm definitely sure there's anxiety around that. Like, will I be deemed an essential worker?
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, will my partner or family member be deemed an essential worker? And how do we reconcile that with this very real sense of safety that we've developed by being at home or working from home, you know? And there's the folks who have been essential workers from day one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who have been on the front lines doing this work, you know? So it's a lot. And there's a lot of identity being played into it, a lot of anxiety. But like I said, like, I think there's a lot of, you know, kindness. You know, I keep going back to that word kindness, and it may feel trite and pat at this point, but like, you know, kindness coupled with advocacy, like you said, you know, asking those questions. Do I need to be doing this? Is there a better way that we can provide this service? You know, things like that. I actually have a question for you. Could you describe mirroring? Can you explain further what mirroring is?
Just trying to like have a reflection of like a sameness, if you will. So like I said, like creating routine, like our weeks can kind of look like they did before. If we like bookend with, you know, when we're waking up, when we're going to sleep, when we're starting and ending work, it's just trying to create a sense of sameness, that you're creating a flow that is similar but different to what you were doing before we were isolated and at home. It's kind of like the short answer, I guess. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So for instance, I take a walk in the time that it would take for me to take the bus to work.
That's great.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
So like providing that space before work as opposed to just rolling out of bed and going straight to the laptop. You know? So that I get, that's almost what you imagine when you say mirroring, correct?
Yeah. So like I still get up in the morning and like have my coffee and, you know, that at the same time, and like take a shower at the same time and dressed, you know, clock in at the same time. So that is like mirrored of my morning process, where it's same and it's constant, so that we're not creating like a new way of doing things. We're trying to mimic what we had previously. So that's great. Like if I would like take the SEPTA in the morning, that takes me 15 minutes to get to work. Like I could take a walk, and that's like my commute, if you will. So that's actually like a really good idea. I like that.
Yeah, awesome. So we are just coming up on time. There are so many questions, and unfortunately it does not look like we are going to be able to get to all of them today, and I apologize. I want to say to everyone, thank you for joining us today. We're happy to have this conversation with you all. Justin, thank you for coming on and,
more than welcome. I'm glad to be here.
What is ultimately a really difficult conversation, but one I think that we are entering and that we can carry after this is all said and done. Taking care of ourselves a little bit better is never a bad thing, and taking care of each other is always a good thing. So I just wanted to leave with one thing that I saw and one thing that I hold as I navigate this pandemic and the responses, is that a lot of us are not working from home. We're trying to work in our houses during a crisis, and we have to remind ourselves that it's difficult to be productive and do a lot of work on a normal day, so. And with that, I just want to say to everyone to be kind to themselves and to each other.
Well, thanks so much, everyone. I hope you took something from this. Feel free to be in contact. My email address is there. I'd be happy to hear from you.